We've reached a point where science and technology have advanced at an exponential rate for so long that it may be far beyond our ability to regulate and control it. This statement might one day be true if we allow cloning to continue. There are 3 different types of cloning: recombinant DNA technology, or DNA cloning, reproductive cloning, and therapeutic cloning. The cloning that I will be talking about today is reproductive cloning. But before I go into my claim, I am going to explain what cloning is. Cloning is the production of individuals who are genetically identical to an already existing individual. The procedure's name is fancy, somatic cell division, but its concept is quite simple. You take a mature but unfertilized egg, you remove or deactivate its nucleus, basically just rip everything out of the middle of it, introduce a nucleus obtained from a specialized somatic cell of an adult organism. Once the egg begins to divide, you transfer the little embryo to a woman's uterus and initiate a pregnancy, basically. Since almost everything is hereditary, the cells come out almost exactly like us. Now for my claim, reproductive cloning is a highly inefficient and expensive procedure that will no doubt cause many problems in the future. Current Congressman Cliff Stearns once said, "In early January I introduced my legislation which, besides prohibiting federal funding of human cloning, also expresses the sense of Congress that foreign nations should establish total prohibition on human cloning as well." This shows just how inefficient cloning is. More than 90% of cloning attempts fail to produce viable offspring. More than 100 nuclear transfer procedures could be required to produce one viable clone. In addition to low success rates, cloned animals tend to have more compromised immune functions and higher rates of infection, tumor growth, and other disorders. Japanese studies have shown that cloned mice live in poor health and die early. About a third of the cloned calves born alive have died young, and many of them were abnormally large. Furthermore, a sheep named Dolly, the first cloned mammal, only lived to the age of 6 and developed lung cancer and arthritis, while the average sheep lives to be 11 or 12. This lowered immune system and higher chance of infection would inherently mean that cloned beings would be more susceptible to catching viruses or getting diseases, thus making it easier for a virus to spread. The cloned individual would also suffer immensely due to these diseases and would live shorter lives due to the faulty cells. Another drastic difficulty in cloning human beings would be their mental state of mind. Imagine for a moment that the world figured out a way to create a cost-effective, perfectly healthy clone. I know this is highly unlikely, but even if such a clone were to be made, his or her psyche would most definitely be in a horrific state of affairs. Just the thought of being a clone is enough to picture how life would be. Always knowing that you are the son that your mother couldn't have, or the possible organ donor for a man you were cloned for. Actually, it's possible you won't even have rights. The whole system of cloning would most definitely end up being a business like the slave trades of the past. With this in mind, it's only obvious that a clone's mind would be a huge mess. With all of the depressed clones, suicide rates would go through the roof. It's only obvious then to state that, both in physical and mental terms, clones would not be stable. This physical and mental instability would create plenty of problems for our society. A higher population rate due to clones would cause a higher crime rate in overall county. The relationship between population rates and crime rates is shown by comparing a low population city with a large population city. For example, the city of Lake Charles in the state of Louisiana has a population of 66,876 and growing, while the city of Houston in the state of Texas has a population of 2,073,729 and growing. In Lake Charles, the amount of murders are at 4, and municipal forcibly raping at 51. Compare this to Houston's murder rate at 377 and forcible rape rate at a huge 854, and you will understand just how bad a population boost of clones, which are desperate and depressed, could do to the world. Another worldwide problem would be disease rates. As I stated earlier, clones would have a lower immune system and would be more susceptible to viruses and disease. This being said, it is clear that viruses would spread more fluently with a large clone population, as the clones would easily catch a certain virus and then spread it to many other people. This has happened in the past, such with citizens of England catching the bubonic plague due to overpopulation and bad living conditions, which would be much like clone living. Overall, it is clear to say that clones would have many problems. With low success rates and high expenses, it should be obvious that cloning is a ridiculous procedure. To top it off, clones will have shorter lives, be mentally unstable, and gain diseases and viruses much more quickly than a normal human being, thus leading to another problem such as higher crime rates or higher disease rates. It is easy to state that these problems, in conjunction with the expenses, are enough to prove that reproductive cloning would cause widespread ruin in our society. As Leon Cass once said, cloning represents a very clear, powerful, and immediate example in which we are in danger of turning procedure into manufacture. and that danger is close at hand.
All right, Andrew, you identify the proposition. I think the phrasing is a little awkward. You've got multiple parts in that proposition. The signposting of the secondary claims needs to be more distinct. Your internal signposting is also not as consistent as it could be. There's an inherent contradiction in a couple of places on your argument, because early on you're talking about how difficult and unsuccessful cloning is, and if it's so difficult and unsuccessful, what's the likelihood that we're going to have this huge population rise that you're talking about? That just doesn't make much sense. And if they're all suicidal anyway, we probably won't have to worry about them too. And they have short lives too, so why are we going to have this population problem? It's not quite clear what's going on here. I think the idea of sticking to reproductive cloning as a potential problem area is not a bad idea, but I'm not sure that the issues that you focused on really deal with the questions that come up because of reproductive cloning, but rather they have to do with population issues. There are certainly arguments about population and the difficulty that we're going to have with larger numbers of people, but I'm not sure that cloning is the biggest threat to population growth. You know, the population of Houston got as large as it did without any assistance from cloning whatsoever. So the notion that suddenly all the clones are going to move into these small towns and swell their population seems a little bit awkward. I thought that you had some interesting scenarios that you're drawing up. They don't seem particularly likely or problematic, except in the, you know, kind of a theoretical way, and there are probably more practical issues to be facing. You did a good job citing a couple of authorities and offering some warnings on us. There's some factual data about the success and failure of cloning that I think could be cited a little bit more clearly. Let me see. Excuse me. And on the presentation, I think you're rushing a little bit too much in the presentation, although the language in the speech is nicely put together. All right, thank you.